Alright, now we're here in Photoshop and we're going to go to the last part of our very long tutorial about how we're going to make cool looking low poly assets without using any third-party softwares except for maybe a 2D software, which in my case is going to be Photoshop, but you can also use the free software called GIMP, which has which has very similar functions, but sometimes they work a little bit different. And I prefer Photoshop to work, so that's why I'm using Photoshop. But without further ado, I have here open all my baked maps that I've done so far. Here is my UV, here is my object normal, here is my normal map, and here is my color information of my mesh. That's very messy, but we can fix that. Alright, I want to start with the normal map though. And we're going to first of all maybe delete some stuff out of this normal. We want to, for example, I want to delete both those things because normal information on those small objects won't really gain me anything. And so I'm just going to delete all of this. And I'm going to not even use masks because I already know that I don't want those things to be visible. Here, this is also a bit tricky, but for now I'm going to leave it, I think. Maybe this part here will also just delete. Alright. So for the most part, I am happy with how the normal map looks. So now from this normal map, we'll create some more additional maps. First of all, we want to create the ambient occlusion map. So I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm actually going to call this normal. And I'm going to make a copy. And this copy, we're going to use this black and white filter, and we can now play with three colors, which is here cyan, blue and magenta, to create the ambient occlusion that we like. So normally ambient occlusion should have real light information or shadow information in it, but what I like to do here is just have my own interpretation of this, I guess. Something that I noticed is that Blender is not very strong in baking good-looking normal maps, at least for me, good-looking ambient occlusion maps. Normal maps is fine, but for me I had the experience that most of my ambient occlusion maps, they didn't look the way I wanted them to look. And other programs such as Substance Designer or Quixel, they have a lot easier time in producing good-looking normal ambient occlusion maps from your high poly mesh. Maybe also because they use the normal as information, I probably guess. Not like Blender. So this looks pretty fine. I'm happy with this with this ambient occlusion map. So I'm going to copy this and call this AO. And I'm going to deactivate this. And I'm actually going to use this copy again for the next map, which is going to be this the curvature map, I call it, or the dirt map. And I'm going to use a filter on this, filter other, and I'm going to use this high pass filter here. I'm going to use it with a strength of, depending on what my mesh looks like and how the size is. Let's zoom in a bit. So this is way too strong. We want to actually have a pretty low number, which is probably like 2. And then from this, I also want to make this black and white. Now what this information here entails is basically what things are cavities and what things are edges, right, in the mesh. And I want these outlines of the bricks to be basically pretty dark, so I know this is going to be my cavities, and then I want to also have those things darker in my albedo or diffuse texture, because then it has more contrast to it and looks nicer. So I'll actually I will use this yellow is not really what I want. We'll use this cyan color, and I'll just play with those different colors here, I guess, to create a dark texture. Something like this. Maybe even a bit stronger. And for the edges, we should increase this. No, should increase this one, green, really. All right. Maybe the red as well. And this. We can just play a little bit with how we want to actually achieve those edges. But the most important thing for me is that the bricks look good. And the windows. Bricks and windows, basically the most important. For the roof, I don't care that much if it's not perfect. But I think something like this looks pretty good. So I will actually also copy this and call this my curvature. And I'm going to remove those two things because I don't need them anymore. So now I have those three maps that I can work with, and I'm going to copy the other maps into this file. And so the next step is basically going to be to copy some of those maps, especially those three or those two here. I will copy them into my channels, because we can work with those channels to actually create mask very fast. So I actually like to use this technique, and I'm going to copy this ambient occlusion as well. So now we have those two masks, and you can see I can press Ctrl and click on them, and then I have a selection of this with which I can then create masks. So now what we want to start with is probably with our bricks, right? We want to go and call this bricks, and we want to make a texture. So let's start with a bricky color. Maybe we don't even want to have red bricks, right? Maybe we want to have I don't know, very soft yellowish bricks. So let's start with a color like this. This is a cool color. And now what I want to do is I want to create a mask out of this material, right? So I will use my magic wand tool, is called in English, interesting. And I'll select my bricks and I will make a mask here. Perfect, now I have my basic color here. And now I can start doing stuff with this. For example, I can go into this layer and I can, for example, already start a pattern. Maybe something very soft. And I will use the overlay for this texture, or maybe even less opacity. So we already have a kind of texture going on here. And the next thing I'm going to do is create a very dark texture. And for this, I'm going to use a mask, and I'm going to use one of those masks here. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to create a mask. And I probably want to invert this mask. And something that we can see is it's not really that strong. It's kind of it's not very visible, is it? And so there's some things we can do. We can, for example, use a different way of overlapping this. For example, multiply, which actually I like it. I think it's good, but I actually think those colors here, they're way too greenish for my taste. Which I'm not sure why. I think this is much better. Alright, and so you can already see how we could produce different masks to gain different effects on our materials, right? And then something that we still also have is our baked ambient occlusion that we didn't use, this one. And we can also use this as a overlay with the multiply function. And what that will do is it will just generate some shadows where the roof is going to be, which actually is really good. So let's actually edit one of our maps so we can use it as a different mask. So what I did here is I used my curvature map and I added some more brightness and contrast to it. And now maybe I want to also do some stuff with this. For example, I could probably go and try to make some noise to this, add noise, and we'll probably want much less amount. Say something like this maybe. And I think that's an awesome looking map. I will copy this and I'll put it in my channels. And now we'll try and see how this looks. Actually, I will just deactivate those things because maybe later on we'll produce some more noise. And I'm actually going back into my bricks material here that I'm working on, and I'll add a new layer. Maybe we'll go really dark this time. Let's see how that looks. And now I'm going to use my this map here, and I'm going to create a mask. And maybe I need to invert this actually. And I think it's too dark. I was wrong. Sometimes you need to experiment with what you want to actually achieve. Maybe something like this, and we can also make this just multiply. Maybe not even multiply, maybe overlay. No, not really. Screen. Screen is interesting actually. Yes, screen, and we use it like this. Perfect. This is what I wanted. So you can already see how our material is coming along quite well. And before you maybe end up working too much in one material, I like to start with other materials as well. So the second biggest material here would be my roof. So I'll actually just go out of this and I'll use my magic wand again. I select this and I create a new group called roof. And this roof will probably put above, and I'm going to create this mask. This mask we'll probably have to edit because I mean stuff like this here, I'm pretty sure this is going to be roof, right? So I can actually just clean out those mistakes that are here. Like I've just fill out all of those things, and I probably want to remove those things here. So I hope this would be fine. Okay, so let's create a material for our roof. Let's start out with something. Maybe I like to have it a bit more to the green. A dark green color would be nice, something like this. And I'm also going to add some patterns to this. Actually, are there any interesting grayscale paper nature patterns append? Fine. Let's see what kind of nature. Oh my god. That's terrible nature. Maybe something like this, and I'm going to make this as a soft light with a very slow opacity. No, I don't like those textures actually. I think I much rather like to use noise textures. They are much simpler to use. Some of them are too small to see. This. Yes, why not? Maybe a bit bigger even. Something like this. Let's actually copy this. Let's give it a mask. No, let's not give it a mask like this. Let's first of all delete this mask. Then we're going to create this mask here. And we're going to use a different color. Nah, it's not really that interesting though. Let's use a different mask. Let's use our ambient occlusion mask actually. That's much better. Yes. And we're going to play a bit with how we're going to overlay this. Something with green, not really. Soft light looks fine. Maybe it's even too dark, just a bit lighter. Yes. Something we can also do, of course, would be if we started, let's say we want to have some stuff we paint ourselves, and we're going to add a black mask, and then I'm just going to work within the mask, and I can use some brushes to add details where I want to, if that's what I'm into. Most of the time I don't really like to work like this in Photoshop, because I don't really have a feedback on how this will look in a 3D environment, right? So I tend to just do my basic stuff, and then I work some more for with Blender itself. But yeah, actually the way you normally do texturing these days is using other software like Substance Painter or Quixel. At least most people do, but I think this is fine if you don't have any experience yet, or you're not sure if you should go into this kind of way of texturing. I think this is a great start for you to learn the basic concept of the workflow of those programs. As you can see, you can, even with Photoshop, you can create some really cool looking stuff. You just need a little bit of time, and maybe I'm just going to reduce this effect. Sorry, so it's only a bit. Alright, so let's see how far we've got. And basically before I continue working on this, I love to just show you how you can actually link this to your Blender mesh. So what I do is I save this as a PSD file, and I will use it here. Yeah, house tutorial, maybe not normal, but house tutorial work file, actually. And now we go back to Blender, and I'm just going to make all those stuff not visible. Oh, we only want our low poly mesh here. And now we can work with some texture stuff. That's awesome. So the thing I do normally is I use this diffuse shader if I'm still in the process and I don't really intend to render anything. So that's perfect, and I'm going to link my work file actually here. And so now I can give it a render, and I can already see kind of, oops, what it will look like. And you can see there's some really messed up shit going on the roof, where the baking kind of didn't work as intended. And so we should probably go and fix that. But as you can also see is that the bricks already look quite nice, and we don't even have linked the normal map yet, so we're still very in the process. But let's fix those map IDs here. So for fixing this, I will probably actually use my UV, right? Because then I can see where are the problems. And if I go to this roof, I can then see, this here should be roof, all of this should be roof, that's roof, you're also roof. And so I can just start fixing those problems. And here is actually here was the biggest issue, right? Where it projected some of the stuff we don't want to. And actually select all of this. Here is still fine. Here you can also add this texture. And we're going to fill this in. Alright, let's deactivate, let's save this. And now you can see if I save it, I can just go to render and it will actually automatically update the texture, which is awesome. And so we have the roof, very basic. We have our bricks that actually look a little bit better. And so something I like to do also is to just go here, have this sunlight, something like this. I like to disable my ambient occlusion so I can see the sunlight. And then I go and add the normal map. So the normal map will be non-color data, and for now I'm just actually going to use this normal map, and we'll see how that looks. Sometimes you have to put the strings up to really get the effect. Not so much in this case, I think. Yeah, and as you can see, those informations are visible, right? So you can see here I have this roof that's very uneven, and that's not too terrible. And you can also, something I would encourage you to do if you work, create as many maps as you like, because having many different of those overlay maps is always a plus. It's always great. So we can use, again, different stuff. Let's say we want to have a bit more brown. And I'm actually going to use this map. then you can also go, if you have a map, for example, like this, you can go in and you can still just play with your own kind of masks. And you can see what happens if you do that. And I mean, here it's kind of too crazy, right, with the way I'm painting, because it doesn't really look kind of realistic. So what you could also do is go in the mask and, for example, work with this blur tool. Or you could work with the smudge tool. It's actually, I like the smudge tool a lot. It's very interesting. Can go pretty crazy. Sometimes you get nice results, sometimes you don't, but I think that's interesting. It creates a bit more variation, but it's kind of more subtle. You can even decrease this effect, just have it very soft. I'll do the same for the next few materials that are left, and then we'll see how this will finish up.